Okay, so you want to build a chalet in Courchevel.
Bienvenue and welcome to 150 Days of Winter.
Hello! 7 screws, 1 plate. Okay, so I was asked, I can't remember when it was, I can't remember how long ago it was, but I was asked by somebody quite naively that they really wanted to build a chalet in Courchevel. After I'd finished laughing at them for a good part of like 20 minutes, it got me thinking about why don't I make a video about how you would actually go about building a chalet in Courchevel. So here we go. We first of all need to talk about financing, okay? The elephant in the room, you've got to be rich, okay? I'm not just talking about rich to buy a chalet in Courchevel. You need to be very rich to build one, okay? I'm talking, you've got to be the love child of Vladimir Putin. You've got to have a dad whose middle name is Bin, as in Salman. You've got to be a lottery winner. And I'm not talking about a normal lottery win. We're talking a Euro Millions rollover. We're talking, not 7 figures, 8 figures, just so we get that out of the way. Second of all, you need to find a plot of land to build your chalet. Now, here comes a problem. Courchevel hasn't sold any new plots of land for, I'm going to say, the best part of 20 years. So realistically, if you want to build a chalet, you of course have to find an old chalet to knock down. Now, unless your grandfather was incredibly clever and had the foresight of building something back in the 60s here, you're going to have to go and find someone else who has a chalet that they can no longer keep the upkeep on. Buy it and then knock it down. If you're building a new chalet, of course you want to build it to how you want, and you want to make use of every single square meter of earth space that they have to build it. If I was to look at an old chalet, when you buy an old chalet, generally they're built above the ground. Back then, they didn't think about going down at all. Now here is a great example of an old build chalet. You can see 2 stories built on top of the ground, flat metal roof, classic example of an old chalet. If someone was to go and buy that to renovate it, they would probably come down to the road level at least if they were building a new one. Again, just showing the utilization of space. All new chalets have basements, sub-basements, whatever. They've realized that is the best way of making the most of the space that they have. Now we have to talk about time scale. Okay, if you're thinking, oh, I can come along, I can knock down a chalet and build another one in its place, yeah, get it done in a year, forget about it. Courchevel does not allow any building work to happen in the winter, which means that realistically you have got between the end of April and the end of November in which to do any building work. And so what generally happens up here is that in the first 5 months, they of course do the demolition, they do the new foundations, and they basically build the shell of the building. Maybe put a roof on it, put windows on it, make it airtight. And then the second year, they do the interior of it. Okay, so if you are thinking about building a chalet, think about a 2-year span in which to build it in. Okay, so behind me is a classic example of first-year demolition of a chalet. Chalet which was there, what it looked like beforehand. And of course now, all you can see is a massive great hole. Now, for the geek inside of me, this is fascinating. The fact, because they're digging below ground, they of course have to build a wall to stop the mountain coming down on them. There, and of course you can see these massive great metal supports that are holding all of that in place while it dries, while it sets up. Okay, All chalets now will have like a vide sanitaire or a space around the back, which has this wall, which basically holds the mountain at bay, which is fascinating. However, when we look at the original photo of the old chalet, you can see that it is about half the size of this plot. The new plot, like here, is both twice the size, like on ground, but also below ground as well. Again, making the most of the money. To just give you some time scale, it is now coming up to the end of July. They have to finish what they're doing by the middle of November, realistically. So they better get a shift on. Now, once you've purchased your rundown old chalet, of course, you will now need to get planning permission. Once you've got that, of course, you will have to go and put one of these outside. This is an avis de construire. This gives everybody, your neighbours, etc., details of what you plan on actually doing with the chalet. And I think it's maybe a month or two that any of your neighbours can object to what you're going to do to the old building. Okay, if we go and have a look at this one in particular, we can see that it says demolition and creation of an individual chalet. Now, of course, depending on who your neighbours are, I've been told horror stories of unfriendly neighbours who wait till almost the end of the period of time that they can object before objecting. So subsequently throwing your building plans out the window completely. Welcome to France. It is a classic example of what happens when something small gets knocked down and is replaced by something which is huge. Okay, this is the Chalet Bergerie, which has kept the same name as the restaurant. Now, for those of you who have been in Courchevel for a very long time, will remember there was a wonderful little peace-side restaurant called the Bergerie. Nice terrace on the Bellecote, great for having like a little hot chocolate, etc. And of course, eventually they go to sell it, which is fine. Yay, capitalism! And of course, what was a 2-floor restaurant turns into a 5-story monstrosity. Or don't hate the player, hate the game. Okay, because that's what happens. Let's move on. Okay, so here's a great example again of, behind me is a new build. I think it was finished 2 years ago, maybe a year ago, called the Lys Martigon. And I believe it's like now a little boutique hotel building. Anyway, before that, the building in its place used to look like this. Okay, all very nice on the outside, chocolate box, all very quaint. However, many years ago, I had the pleasure of actually going inside of this little chocolate box chalet. One of I believe one of the original chalets to be built in Courchevel. Don't quote me on that. However, I had the pleasure of going in there, God, about 15, 16 summers ago, and well, it was, put it this way, the interior was built for hobbits. I'm not 6 foot, okay? Yeah, and yet when I walked in there, I basically caught my head on the top of the doors. Yeah, when people moan about like old chalets being knocked down, well, you know, there is a reason, okay? Money is one of them. Hey, yay, capitalism. However, you know, if you have to spend your time walking around like a hunchback, that's probably not a great reason to go and not knock down a chalet. And of course, when the old chalet was sold, I believe it sold for, I think, 10 million. I don't know if 10 million also included partially building the new building. However, when I looked at the estate agent's page back then, I believe it was a nice round 8-figure sum. Now you know what I mean about winning the lottery. Twice. Anyway, I'll show you one more thing. And of course, which leads me to my final point, which is this little derelict shed that I'm going to say is probably the most expensive shed in all of France. Okay, it's probably the most expensive shed in Courchevel. In France, there is, I believe, like Napoleonic laws or something about succession, so that when a bunch of like kids inherit a building, unless all of them are in agreement that they want to knock it down, they basically don't, okay? And this, I think, and I might be wrong, is a reason why this has sat derelict for, I'm going to say, the best part of 20 years. Finally, for the first time, it's got an avis de construire sign on the side of it. However, in a resort where land is such a premium that basically you have this thing that has just been sitting here rotting. And I tell you, in 20 years, no one has ever lived in it. Not that I've ever seen, okay? Basically, moss is the only thing that has actually managed to, like, get a foothold. It's an absolute shocker. However, the irony as well is that this chalet there, this one which is right behind, just down there, it's called Chalet Bergerie, which is probably one of the most expensive chalets in Courchevel. So there you have the most expensive shed and of course the most expensive chalet. Okay, so there you have my very brief description of how to build a chalet in Courchevel. If you have found this interesting, maybe you want me to go into anything in more detail or whatever, well, click the subscribe button, click the like button, leave me a comment down below, and I will see you all in the next video. Ciao.